The first thing he did was point at the public defender like she was something dirty on the bottom of his shoe. The second thing he did was laugh. "I do not consent to representation by a public pretender," he said, loud enough to bounce off the courtroom walls, then slapped a stack of homemade legal papers onto the defense table and added, "I answer only to common law and God." A few people in the gallery chuckled in disbelief. Then Judge Caprio looked up and the room felt different instantly, as if the light itself had gone colder. Because the judge did not look confused. He looked offended on behalf of everyone this man thought he could humiliate. And that was the moment everybody understood something extraordinary was about to happen. The defendant's name was Malcolm Voss, and he had the kind of money that taught him early how often bad behavior gets renamed confidence. He stood in a tailored navy suit with a gleaming red tie, silver cufflinks, and a posture so loose it bordered on disrespectful. His blonde hair was slicked back, his jaw clean, his smile practiced and poisonous. He kept one hand in his pocket even while speaking to the bench, as if court were a cocktail party he might leave whenever he got bored. Beside him sat Assistant Public Defender Elena Morales, young, calm, perfectly composed in a charcoal blazer, legal pad aligned square with the table. Though anyone with eyes could see, he was trying to use her presence as part of a performance. Across the aisle, near the witness row, sat the woman whose life he had already turned into a nightmare. Martha Ellis, 68, a school crossing guard with a soft gray cardigan, sensible shoes, and a plastic brace wrapped around her wrist. She looked like somebody's aunt, somebody's grandmother, somebody who had spent a lifetime helping children across roads and never once imagined she'd end up here, trembling under fluorescent lights because a rich man decided ordinary people did not count. If you've ever seen entitlement walk into a room believing it can bend truth by volume alone, stay with this one, and tell me in the comments the exact moment you knew Malcolm Voss had made the worst mistake of his life. Like the video if you believe some people only understand limits when a real judge gives them one. At first it sounded procedural, almost boring if you weren't paying attention. Malcolm was charged in connection with a school zone incident that his attorney had initially described as an overblown traffic misunderstanding. He had appeared for a hearing on assault, reckless driving, intimidation, and filing fraudulent retaliatory paperwork against public officials. But he had arrived with a different plan. He wanted to fire the public defender, reject the authority of the court, and represent himself. He called himself a sovereign citizen. He said the flag in the room made the court maritime. He said his name in capital letters belonged to a corporation, and not to him. He said the state had no dominion over a living man traveling in private conveyance. He said it all with a grin, glancing over his shoulder every few seconds to make sure the gallery was listening. Judge Caprio let him talk just long enough to reveal himself. Then he asked one question. "Mr. Voss, do you understand the charges against you?" Malcolm smirked. "I understand that fiction has been printed on paper." Caprio's face did not move. "Do you understand the possible penalties?" Malcolm shrugged. "Penalties only exist for subjects." A hush passed through the room. Elena Morales lowered her eyes briefly, the way lawyers do when a client is walking himself toward disaster in broad daylight. Martha Ellis sat perfectly still, but her fingers tightened around a folded handkerchief in her lap. Judge Caprio looked from Malcolm to Elena and back again. "No," he said softly, "I do not permit defendants to mistake theater for legal competence." Malcolm's smile stiffened. That's when the surface story cracked open. The prosecutor rose and summarized what had actually happened the morning of the incident. Martha Ellis had been standing in a rain jacket beneath a flashing school crossing sign, guiding children across the street, when Malcolm Voss drove his black SUV through the stop line. Not rolled, not crept, drove through. Martha stepped forward with her sign raised, and instead of stopping, he accelerated, clipping her hip hard enough to spin her sideways. A 9-year-old boy froze in the crosswalk. Martha shoved the boy clear with one arm and took the impact with the other. Her wrist fractured when she hit the asphalt. Malcolm got out furious, not frightened, not apologetic, but furious that someone had dared delay him. When Martha, shaking and in pain, asked for his license and insurance, he leaned over her and said, "You don't command free men." The courtroom went silent. Even Malcolm's expression changed slightly, not with shame, but with irritation that the room was now seeing him through someone else's eyes. He tried to laugh it off. "She threw herself into the lane for attention," he said. "It was cruel, absurd," and he said it with the ease of a man who had spent years talking down to cashiers, clerks, teachers, women, anyone he thought existed below his altitude. Martha finally looked at him then. There was fear in her face, yes, but there was something stronger too, something harder. "I saved a child," she said quietly. "You were angry a child mattered more than your schedule." A low murmur rolled through the gallery. Malcolm snorted and leaned back. "That's a lovely speech," he said. "Maybe she should join the movies." The energy of the room shifted all at once. Even people who had come in curious now looked disgusted. Judge Caprio asked for the school bus footage. That's when everything changed. The monitor flickered to life, and the courtroom saw it in grainy, terrible clarity. Rain glossed the street. Martha stood in a fluorescent vest, stop paddle lifted, body small but firm in the roadway. Children crossed in a little cluster. Malcolm's SUV appeared from the left, too fast, too smooth, never breaking the way an innocent driver brakes when surprised. The hood surged forward. Martha thrust one child backward with startling force, twisted, and the mirror clipped her shoulder before she crashed down on one knee. Gasps burst from the gallery. A woman whispered, "Oh my God." The courtroom went dead silent as the video continued. Malcolm stepped out, face tight with rage, not concern, and towered over her as she tried to rise. He pointed at her while she was still on the wet ground. No audio was needed. The body language told the story plainly. Entitlement standing over injury, privilege leaning over pain. Malcolm's jaw tightened. "That doesn't show intent," he said quickly. "It shows confusion." Judge Caprio didn't answer. He asked instead for the officer's body cam. Now the audio came in, harsh and undeniable. Malcolm's voice rang through the speakers. "She's a crossing guard, not a human barricade." Then, seconds later, when the responding officer asked him for identification, he laughed and said, "I pay more in taxes than she makes in a year. Move her aside and write the city a bill." The reaction was immediate. Somebody in the back muttered, "Monster." Martha closed her eyes for 1 second, breathed in, and opened them again. Malcolm realized too late that his own words sounded uglier outside his head. Elena Morales, the very lawyer he had mocked as a public pretender, then asked permission to address the court. Malcolm snapped, "I don't authorize her." Judge Caprio didn't even glance at him. "Mr. Voss," he said, "you are the subject of this hearing, not the director of it." Elena rose, calm as winter, and explained why the issue of representation could not be treated like a joke. Over the previous week, Malcolm had sent 7 handwritten documents to the clerk's office rejecting counsel, but hidden inside those documents were demands for Martha Ellis's home address, her employment records, and copies of witness statements before discovery. He had also attempted to file retaliatory liens against the responding officer and 2 school administrators. One of the papers included a line that chilled the room when Elena read it aloud. "If forced to defend myself, I will question the old woman until she admits what fear already knows." The courtroom went silent again. Dead silent. Martha's hand flew to her mouth. Malcolm shifted in his chair for the first time all morning. He lashed out immediately. "That's strategy," he barked. "That's not a threat." Caprio leaned forward slightly. "Self-representation is a right," he said, each word clean and cold, "not a hunting license." There it was, the line that tore straight through Malcolm's swagger. A man in the gallery whispered, "Wow." Malcolm tried to recover, but his face had begun to shine faintly with sweat. The posture changed first, then the tone. Arrogance was becoming defense. The prosecutor wasn't finished. Phone records connected Malcolm to an online sovereign citizen forum where he had bragged about bleeding courts dry with paper. Screenshots showed him planning the hearing like a performance. "Fire the defender on camera," one message read. "Then cross the crossing lady myself. Make the judge look scared to stop me." Another message, sent at 2:14 a.m. the night before, said, "Old people crumble if you keep them talking." The courtroom let out one collective breath of disgust. Martha stared straight ahead, eyes wet, but spine unbent. Malcolm looked suddenly smaller in his expensive suit, like a child hiding in a man's tailoring. And still, he could not stop himself. Looking at Judge Caprio with open contempt, he said the line that poisoned whatever air he had left. "With respect, Your Honor, I don't need a taxpayer babysitter because I'm smarter than everyone in this room." A gasp cracked through the benches. Even the stenographer paused. The courtroom went silent in that heavy, electric way that announces a reckoning. Judge Caprio removed his glasses, folded them, and set them down with such deliberate calm it felt more devastating than anger. Then came the monologue that ended Malcolm Voss long before any final order did. The judge said courts are not arenas for ego, and counsel is not a toy a defendant can throw away when he believes intimidation will serve him better. He said the Constitution protects the accused, yes, but it does not authorize them to weaponize procedure against the weak, terrorize witnesses, or turn a courtroom into an extension of the same bullying that brought them there. He said Martha Ellis had stood in the rain to protect children she did not even know, while Malcolm Voss had used freedom as a costume for selfishness. "A man who refuses every lawful duty is not sovereign," he said, voice low and merciless. "He is simply undisciplined." Malcolm tried to interrupt, but Caprio lifted one hand and stopped him cold. "You do not reject legal help because you cherish principle. You reject it because you imagine cruelty looks stronger without a witness beside you. It doesn't. It looks exactly like what it is." Nobody moved. Nobody coughed. Nobody whispered. The courtroom went dead silent for one final beat as Judge Caprio delivered the consequence. He denied Malcolm's request to dismiss appointed counsel, finding his waiver neither knowing nor honest. He ordered Elena Morales to remain as counsel of record, revoked Malcolm's bail based on witness intimidation and retaliatory filings, issued a full protective order for Martha Ellis and the child witness, and referred the fraudulent lien documents for separate criminal review. Then he looked directly at Malcolm, whose confidence had now collapsed into something slack and frightened, and gave him the final line that would follow him long after the deputies took his arm. "You came in here demanding sovereignty," Judge Caprio said. "What you've earned is supervision." The room exhaled all at once. Martha cried then, but quietly, with relief instead of fear. Elena placed a steady hand over hers for just a second before gathering the files. Malcolm looked around as if searching for one last audience to rescue his pride, but the faces watching him now held no admiration, only contempt. He had arrived hoping to perform independence. He left under guard, undone by his own voice, his own messages, his own hunger to dominate anyone he thought could not hit back. Later, the ripples kept spreading. The retaliatory lien scheme brought in other victims, a librarian, a code officer, another elderly woman he had tried to frighten with paper threats. Martha returned to her school crossing after her wrist healed, and parents who had watched the hearing began bringing her coffee in the mornings and thanking her for what she had done that day in the rain. The child she pushed to safety made her a card with a crooked drawing of a stop sign and the words, "You saved me." Elena Morales became something of a local legend herself, the public defender he tried to humiliate and instead revealed as the one person in the room strong enough to stand between his ego and a frightened old woman. And Judge Caprio's one-liners traveled exactly where justice travels when it has been spoken clearly enough, everywhere. So if you felt that moment when the courtroom went silent, if you knew the instant arrogance stopped being funny and started collapsing under the weight of truth, say so in the comments. Like this, if you believe dignity deserves protection and bullies deserve boundaries. Subscribe for more stories where justice doesn't need to shout to be unforgettable, and share this with someone who needs the reminder that the law, in the right hands, can still make cruelty sit down and listen.